Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For the benefit of our international audience who didn't have the pleasure of growing up with Prue Leith, I just want to give you a little bit of a background to her CV. She's been Businesswoman of the Year. She has a CBE in the food industry. She's had a Michelin star restaurant, 12 honorary degrees from different universities. She's employed 500 people. She's been on so many boards, I can't even mention them. She writes novels, cookbooks, and now she's on the Great British Bake Off. She's also done the Great British Menu for over 11 years. So without further ado, may I introduce you to Prue Leith, our show ambassador.
All right. So now, what did the previous speaker have that I haven't got, that I have half his audience? I should bang the drum. Anyway, I'm very impressed with those of you who did come. Thank you. It's true that I've had a very varied career, but nearly all of it has been around food. And an enormous amount of it has been about a sort of obsessive desire to get children to eat vegetables. Now that sounds very boring. If you say to children, eat up your vegetables, they don't really always want to do it. And I have been amazed walking around today at how many innovative charitable efforts there are, many companies trying to do exactly that, really doing it very excitingly. And it's interesting that Lidl won a prize for the way they market fresh fruit to children. So there's a lot happening, and I think one of the problems is that there's a huge amount happening, but we don't all know what each other does. And I know a lot about it because one week I'll go to the Sustainable Restaurants Association, be talking to chefs about how to get customers to eat more vegetables and how to get more fruit and veg on menus. And then I'll be at this Children's Food Trust which I started originally when it was called the School Food Trust, not the Children's Food Trust. And that was a government venture to try to help children eat well at school and have decent school dinners. That morphed into the Children's Food Trust and is now a private charity. And I'm a patron of one of their projects, which is called Let's Get Cooking, which is all about getting kids to cook at school. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in a minute. But what I really wanted to emphasize is that if only we could persuade government, really, to understand the importance of fruit and veg. To be honest, I think we could solve a whole lot of problems all at once. But it needs that determination and that ability to see a little ahead, a bit further ahead than 5 years before the next election, or 3 months before the next election, or 2 hours before the next election. And politicians' frames are very short. They don't think very long term. So I wanted to tell you about how Finland, I've got any Finnish people here? Swedish? Well, Finland is my dream of how we should handle food education. And basically what they do in Finland is they have all free school meals. You're not allowed, if you're a Finnish child, you're not allowed to bring a lunchbox into school. And the reason for that is that the best parent in the world cannot resist putting a cake or a biscuit or a bar of chocolate. I mean, I'm the same. If you pack your child's lunchbox, it's quite competitive. The child wants what they see in the supermarket, which is often not very healthy, and you want the child to be proud of its lunchbox and be able to trade in the playground and so on. So, no lunchboxes. Every child sits down to lunch with their colleagues and their teachers, and they have a perfectly balanced menu. It's the same menu throughout the school, except if you've got a special diet or something, but it is different every single day, so that every day you're faced with different food. But because you're not allowed to bring food into school, you're quite hungry by the time you get to lunch, so you will try it. And you try something else the next day and the next day. So you get to have a variety of food. Food is taught cross-curricularly, so that when you're learning sport, you learn about what foods will help you be a good sportsman. When you're doing history, you learn about history of food. When you do geography, it always includes food. Maths include, everything is cross-curricular. All the children are taught to cook, and they also all help in the kitchens. The kitchens are very well equipped, so that labor costs are very cheap, because although they cook everything from fresh, and they cook it all in batches of 20, so as the kids, there are big schools, they come through a cafeteria line, every few minutes another fresh 20-portion tray of food comes out of the oven and bang onto the cafeteria. So they're eating really fresh food. It's all cooked from scratch. And believe it or not, their price per head per child is cheaper than ours for school dinners. And I said when I was going around one of these schools, look, this is all very well. Of course you have 99% uptake, and they all eat everything. Of course they do. They're hungry, and they're not allowed to come in with pockets full of sweets. But of course, I bet when they get out of school, when they leave school, they're back on junk. And they said, would you like to come and look at one of our universities? So they leave school at 17 and they go to, or 16, and at 17 they go to college. And in college, there are 14,000 children in one college, or huge numbers of children. And I went into one of their dining rooms, and all around the edge were all the usual brands you'd expect, McDonald's and Costa and various Finnish brands. But in the middle were what they were used to, which was basically hot meals and salads and healthy food. And nearly all the children were eating what they were used to. We all eat what we're used to. So it's a question of getting people used to it. But I don't need to teach you this, because you are in the fruit and veg business, and you know that what we're trying to sell is healthy. So I've spent a lot of time on school dinners particularly, and needless to say, I'm very upset about Mrs. May's decision to scrap free school lunches and exchange it for free school breakfasts. Of course, I'm in favour of free school breakfasts, but not at the expense of losing the opportunity to teach children to like veg. Anyway, we'll see. I want to tell you just a bit about what the Children's Food Trust does now, because all that stuff about lunches we put in place when it was the School Food Trust. It's now the Children's Food Trust, which means it's been able to broaden its remit. And while I was still chairing it, we went off to the lottery, and we got them to cough up £20 million to help us do after-school cookery clubs. But fair enough, the funding we opened 5,000 cookery clubs in schools, mostly primary schools, all over the country. And what we hoped would happen would be that schools would become so addicted to having the clubs that they would go on growing. And up to a point that happened for a while, but when the funding disappeared, that's fine for schools that are in good areas, where the parents are pretty educated, where they're pretty committed to good food, and where people believe that it's important that children should learn to cook. But in very poor areas, with schools that are really strapped for a budget, it's very difficult for them to keep the Let's Get Cooking clubs going. And I mean, they are remarkable. One of the things I think we were really clever about is we didn't just say, this is a fun club for kids to learn to cook. We said it has to be healthy cooking, which doesn't, of course, mean that you can never have any chocolate and you can never have a cake and you can never... It's about balance. So the children do a lot of healthy cooking. They learn a lot about veg and fruit. And most importantly, we said, you can't join the club unless you bring a grown-up adult from outside the school with you to the club. And this was our way of getting to the parents, because if we had just said to the parents, you need to learn to cook and stop giving your children junk, they'd have quite rightly been indignant and said, get off my back, and what's it got to do with you, and I'll eat what I like and I'll cook what I like. But if we said, come to the school and support your children who are learning to cook, and it's fun, and and the children are saying, go on, Mum, come, I can't join unless you come. We managed to get the parents in. And that has been absolutely transformative. We've done a lot of research. What happens is about 50% of children, of families, have actually changed their diet since they started to go to the clubs, because they do a recipe there which they like, and then they want to do it at home. And I think 92% of parents who have come to the club have gone home and cooked something that they learnt with the clubs. So we know it works and we know it's good. And I really beg any of you who are involved in the industry, if you want to support something that teaches children to cook with fresh fruit and veg, because it's always fresh stuff, please support the Children's Food Trust. What else can I tell you? One of the other projects we do, or this Children's Food Trust does, is, which is quite new, we've just started doing it, which is a big project. It's supported by Sainsbury's, and it's in Peterborough and in Hackney. So that we've only got, it's just 2 pilots that we're doing now. But we think we'll take it everywhere. And that's all about how not to waste food. It's all about how to buy sensibly, how to not buy too much, which is one of the big drivers of waste, and then how to use leftovers and how to shop sensibly, and frankly, how to use veg. One of the big arguments for vegetable-based menus is the cost. It is much cheaper to make a dish that is nutritionally sound. If you think of the sort of classic nutritional pyramid, you should have a lot of veg at the the base should be veg, and then quite a lot of carbohydrates in the form of preferably sort of oats or good grains, or potato, and then a little bit of protein and very little fat. It's that pyramid: tiny bit of fat, little bit of protein, good carbs, and great veg. And if we could do that, you'd sell a lot more veg, and we'd grow up a much healthier nation. So that's my speech of the day.
Thank you so much, Prue. That was fascinating. Can we just reiterate again, what is your call to action to our audience business members, how they can support encouraging children to eat more produce?
Well, I think we can all do. I mean, I was so impressed in how many really good initiatives there are. And so I beg you, keep doing that and support each other. This is one of the things when I really believe that parts of the industry can join together to do things. And of course, I would really welcome any offers of help for the school, for the Children's Food Trust, for the Let's Get Cooking clubs, because it really is, we use all volunteers, we get a lot of the food and veg donated, but it's still an expensive thing to cook, to teach children to cook well. It's not a case of mixing up cornflakes with chocolate and putting them in a cupcake container and calling that cooking. We're really trying to get children to eat their greens and enjoy them. So it does cost a bit of money. So any help you could give, or help in kind with veg, or get your staff to volunteer. I mean, I don't know how many of you are England-based anyway, but we're all over the UK, so we'd love a bit of help.
Thank you, Prue. I'd like to take some questions from the audience. Does anyone have a question?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, Prue. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to know how did you evaluate these results you had in the cooker clubs with the percentile with children changing their diets and the parents become to...
Because we have 5,000 cookery clubs, and what the Children's Food Trust does is, it's not our staff that cook in it or teach in it. What we do is we train, from each school that wants a club, we train 2 volunteers who are parents and 1 teacher. So we train them, and then we provide the recipes, and we provide the nutritional advice and all the stuff like that. And so we are constantly in touch with those 3 people in each club, and we just simply sent them a survey and got as many of their members, or rather their members' parents, because it's the child that's the member, to answer the... and if we didn't get an answer, we assumed that they weren't interested, and we regarded it as a no. If we did get an answer, we worked out how many people, among all the ones we had touched, how many had been affected. And we were astonished, because we didn't think it would be anything like as successful as it is. So it works.
Another question.
How many of you are actively involved in trying to get children to eat more veg and fruit in different ways? Yeah. So how are you involved?
I go to Newcastle University, and there's a social enterprise charity called Food Nation.
Oh yeah.
So I work with them. I help out with cookery classes and educating from adults to children.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone want to tell? You see, this is what astonishes me, is how many people are involved, and we don't know about each other.
Hi, I'm Sam Valley from Farm Africa, and we work in a school in Kenya to grow vegetables in Nairobi. So it's like an urban agriculture project, and we then cook with the vegetables that they produce, and kind of teach them about diet and science at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's
brilliant. Very good, very good. Anyone else want to tell us about their...
I work for the Food Foundation, and we are actually running a competition shortly to look at how we can advertise vegetables to children, but we also translate evidence-based research into policy to try and improve food policy to support the healthy lives of children.
Brilliant. Right. Anybody want to ask me any questions, or ask anybody else any questions? Yeah?
I was wondering, what do you think are going to be the problems coming up in the future for children and diets? Is there anything that you think is a growing problem that you're worried about?
I think there are 2 problems. There are lots of problems, but the most obvious one is the... I really feel quite passionately that for 12 years, ever since Jamie Oliver did his first program, which was called School Dinners, and it exposed how much junk children were being fed in schools. Ever since then, and the result of that was that they set up the School Food Trust, changed the law about what could be given to children in school, got cookery lessons put into schools, and investment in kitchens, and investment in training school dinner ladies, and investment in things like, from different sources. For 12 years, there's been a steady movement into more food education. I think this could come completely undone now, and for two reasons. One is because Mrs. May has been persuaded that free school breakfast is a better deal than free school dinners. Well, of course, I'm all for breakfast. Too many children arrive hungry, but the problem with breakfast is not every child will go to them. And if you've got children at lunchtime, and the lunch is free, 85% of the children do take that lunch, even though they have the option of bringing in a dinner, a lunchbox. So I think that's a real problem. And then I think there's another problem, which, I'm only talking about England and Wales and Northern Ireland. And that is that I forgot what I was going to say. It's called senility, Can't remember. Anyway, but how maddening. But I think that the problem with worldwide is simply the most scary problem is frankly the iPhone. Children don't sit down and talk to their parents, or don't sit down and communicate. We're losing the ability to communicate directly. We do everything through a telephone. And that means that sit-down lunches or suppers, or even once a meal, it used to be that in England, at the weekends, families would have Sunday lunch together, or Friday night supper together, or something. But now the statistics are terrifying about how very little we put our knees under and talk to each other. And I think all that is to do with, that helps social, I wouldn't like to say table manners, because that's not what I'm after. It's about sharing and talking and conversing and enjoying each other and having pleasure in eating together. And the industry has to respond to the way people want to eat. And so in a way, we sort of encourage it by making everything handheld, because that's how children like to eat. But I'm worried about that too, because I think if you grow up to 14, and I recently had lunch in a pub with a family, and the 14-year-old boy was obviously extremely embarrassed because there wasn't a burger on the menu, and so he would have to eat with a knife and fork, and he'd never eaten with a knife and fork. So I think that's just bad for, I think people ought to learn how to do that sort of stuff. And I think there's some evidence now that our actual brain paths are changing because we spend so much time on IT. Of course, we all use it. I think social media is probably the way to get people to eat fruit and veg. And I know many little companies and recipe websites that are bloggers who are doing a terrific job. But I think they're outnumbered by kids who are just not eating proper food at all, because you can't hold it easily in your hand. All the stuff you can hold easily in your hand in this country is not good for you. In the Far East it's better. In India it's better. Street food almost anywhere is better than in this country. I'm getting myself into big trouble now.
If I could just ask a quick question, Prue. Recently I read you quoted that only 1% of school packed lunches in the UK are up to the proper nutritional standards.
That's true.
Which is shocking. How can we educate parents to encourage their children to eat more fresh produce, and to educate parents on how to do the packed lunch?
I have no idea how you can do that, because it is such a natural thing for somebody, a parent who's packing a lunch, to want to put something in it that the child is going to love. And it's like saying, it's a little message, I still love you. You open and there's a finger of fudge in there, and they think, oh, well, I mean, subconsciously they'll think of me, and it's about love. Actually, what we need to do is to give them a very nice, healthy sandwich, a couple of carrot sticks, and maybe a bit of hummus to dip it into, and an apple, and whatever. And I don't know what the answer is, except to beg parents to be sensible, because something that goes into the lunchbox every day is not a treat. And manufacturers have the upper hand here. They have, something like let's take Mars, a Mars bar. Mars will have more budget to market that chocolate bar in a day than the Children's Food Trust will have for a whole year to influence 22,000 schools and lots of parents and the whole nation. I don't know if any of you heard, were there at when we had that sort of panel this morning, right at the beginning. What's the guy who was right up on the right-hand side? He's American. Anyway, his whole thing is that unless this industry gets together and funds a sort of worldwide serious marketing push, well, I suppose he's thinking of America and I'm thinking of the UK, but we will never beat the manufacturers, because if I was marketing manager for Mars, of course I'd want you to eat a Mars a day. That would be my job, to make sure you did. And if it's full of fat and sugar and salt, which it very often is if it's a caramelly thing, all the better. Those are the cheapest foods available to manufacture. If you can make a bar out of them, who wouldn't? But it's, that's why we have this. We still have a rising obesity problem in spite of all the knowledge. I don't believe there's a person